He's the voice of a generation, the sound that defined heartbreak, longing, and everything in between. Steve Perry wasn't just a singer, he became the emotional engine behind some of the most powerful ballads in rock history. Whether it was the soaring final chorus of Faithfully or the whispered intimacy of Open Arms, he knew how to speak directly to the human heart. But even legends have a line they won't cross. Even the strongest voices break, because one day Steve Perry just disappeared. No tour, no farewell, no dramatic press release. He stepped away from the stage and vanished into silence. For more than 2 decades, fans wondered what had happened. Why did the voice that moved millions simply stop singing? The truth didn't come from a tabloid. It came from a single song, not a journey anthem, not a power ballad played on repeat, but a quiet, haunting track, recorded years later and never performed live. A song Perry only released because of a promise, a personal vow, a goodbye wrapped in melody, and the woman it was written for was the only person he ever called the love of his life. What's the story behind the one song Steve Perry still can't sing without breaking down? And why did he choose to record it anyway, knowing what it would cost him? Because some songs don't chart, they bleed. For more powerful stories behind the legends of music, subscribe to RetroWaves. Every story is rooted in truth, shaped by heartbreak, and built on the echoes of voices that still haunt us. Now, back to the story. In the early 1980s, Steve Perry was unstoppable. He had joined Journey in 1977 and quickly transformed the band from a fusion-style rock group into a commercial powerhouse. His first full album with the band, Infinity, was a massive success. And it was only the beginning. With Perry at the mic, Journey released hit after hit: Evolution, Departure, Escape, Frontiers. Songs like Don't Stop Believin', Any Way You Want It, Separate Ways, If We Can Go On, to survive the time, and Faithfully. Became stadium-filling anthems. By 1983, Perry wasn't just a star, he was the voice. But behind that success was a growing strain. The relentless touring schedule, the constant pressure to deliver perfection, and the weight of being Journey's frontman began to take a toll. Perry, always more reserved than his larger-than-life voice suggested, started to pull away emotionally. At the same time, his mother became seriously ill. He was exhausted, emotionally and physically. In 1987, Steve Perry released his first solo album, Street Talk, featuring the hit Oh Sherry. The record was a commercial success, but behind the scenes, he was burning out. By the mid-1990s, Journey was preparing for a major reunion. They had released Trial by Fire in 1996, which included the single When You Love a Woman. It was a radio hit. The album went platinum. But then, disaster struck. While hiking in Hawaii, Perry suffered a hip injury that required surgery. He was hesitant about undergoing the operation. The band was ready to tour. Perry needed time. When he didn't move quickly enough, they made a choice. Journey would go on without him. Perry later described the moment as devastating. No farewell show, no final bow, just silence.
It was a combination of the passion for music had left me. I could not.
For the next 24 years, he disappeared from the public eye. No albums, no performances, no interviews. Fans speculated wildly. Some said he had lost his voice. Others claimed he was battling depression. None of that was confirmed. In truth, Perry had simply walked away. But during those years of absence, something unexpected happened. He met someone. Her name was Kellie Nash, a PhD in psychology, bright, vibrant, joyful, and living under the shadow of terminal cancer. Steve Perry fell in love, and for the first time in decades, he came back to life. When Steve Perry met Kellie Nash, it wasn't at a Hollywood party, it wasn't through music, it wasn't even in person at first. In interviews, Perry revealed that he had seen Kellie in a documentary about cancer patients. She was featured briefly, and something about her caught his attention.
Was one night when she was not doing well, she said, honey, I need to ask you a favor. I said, what's that? If something was to ever happen to me, that you won't go back into isolation, for I feel it would make it all for naught. And that was like a statement I just didn't know what to think about. It's just overwhelming. But she was looking at the arc of her whole life, and so I said, I promise I'll make that promise. I won't go back in isolation. So
he reached out through a friend connected to the project and asked if it would be okay to email her. To his surprise, she agreed. Kellie was cautious at first. She had stage 4 breast cancer that had returned and spread. But she was also full of life, quick-witted, fierce, brave. They started talking. Emails turned to phone calls turned to visits, and soon they were inseparable. Perry said he hadn't felt that kind of connection in years. She challenged him. She made him laugh. She reminded him of who he used to be, before the fame, before the heartbreak. Even while she was enduring chemotherapy, surgeries, and the weight of terminal illness, she kept him grounded. She encouraged him to sing again, to write, to stop hiding. Their time together wasn't long, just over a year. But in that time, something changed in Steve Perry. He began to feel music again, not as a job, not as a performance, but as a lifeline. He started writing a song, not for a label, not for a fan base, for her. The lyrics came slowly, carefully, with the full weight of what he feared was coming. When Kellie passed away in December 2012, she left behind a devastated Steve Perry and the beginnings of the most personal song he'd ever written. He called it, I Need You, and for years, he couldn't bring himself to finish it. In 2018, after a silence that had lasted nearly a quarter century, Steve Perry released his third solo album. It was called Traces, and tucked quietly within its track list, away from the big production numbers, the radio-friendly hooks, was a gentle, aching ballad. I Need You.
I need you.
The song is intimate, almost bare, no roaring guitars, no layered effects, just Perry's voice, lower, older, but unmistakably filled with emotion, and a soft, minimal arrangement. Many fans assumed it was a love song, but it was more than that. It was a farewell.
I didn't realize.
According to Perry, he had made a promise to Kellie before she passed, that he wouldn't disappear again, that he would share his music again, that he would let people hear him again, even if it hurt. And it did hurt. Recording I Need You was not like recording Separate Ways or Any Way You Want It. This wasn't showmanship. This was grief in slow motion. Perry later said in interviews that he had to stop multiple times during recording sessions. His voice would shake. Sometimes it would break. He wasn't trying to sing through the pain. He was singing to it. The lyrics are sparse but loaded. I need you, but you're gone. He never said those lines were directly about Kellie, but he didn't have to. The emotion in his voice made it clear. To this day, Steve Perry has never performed I Need You live. In fact, in the few interviews where the song is mentioned, he visibly pauses before answering, as if even talking about it risks unraveling the stitches he used to hold himself together. To understand why I Need You carries so much weight, you have to understand what Perry walked away from. In the 1990s, Journey was still one of the most recognizable names in music. The band had reunited briefly to record Trial by Fire in 1996, and the success of the single When You Love a Woman suggested fans were ready for a full-blown comeback. But Steve Perry wasn't. After suffering a hip injury while hiking, he needed surgery. He was reluctant. Not just because of the pain, but because deep down, something in him had already changed. The other members of Journey waited. Then they made a decision. They would move forward with or without him. They replaced him in 1998. It was a devastating moment, not just for Perry, but for the fans who still associated that voice with everything Journey stood for. Perry didn't lash out publicly. He just stepped back. He avoided the spotlight. He turned down opportunities. Even when Journey was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2017, Perry attended, but did not perform. The years rolled on, and for a while it seemed like that chapter of his life was closed for good. Until Kellie. She didn't push him to return. She simply asked, "What would make you happy?" And for the first time, Perry realized the answer wasn't silence. It was music, not for charts, not for critics, for her. And so Traces was born, a record of grief, memory, and fragile hope. And at its heart, one song that he still can't bring himself to sing aloud. After the release of Traces, Perry did a handful of interviews. He spoke about Kellie, about the years he spent away from the spotlight, about how hard it was to find his way back. But when the question came up, "Will you tour again?" his answer was always hesitant, not because he didn't want to, but because some songs come with a price. When asked directly about I Need You, Perry didn't offer a rehearsed line or a vague deflection. He paused. "It's a very personal track," he said quietly. And that was it, just a quiet truth. People close to Perry, engineers, musicians, friends, have shared that he tried singing the song in rehearsals. He couldn't finish. His voice, one of the most powerful instruments in rock history, faltered because of grief. And that's why, even now, he's never performed it live. I Need You exists solely as a recording, because to perform it would mean reliving the loss. And some wounds, even with time, never quite close. Over the years, fans have pored over Perry's catalog, wondering which songs carry hidden meanings. Oh Sherry, his 1984 solo hit, was famously written for his then-girlfriend, Sherry Swafford. It was a celebration of their relationship, but one that ultimately didn't last. Though he still occasionally references that song, it appears less frequently in his public conversations. Some believe it's tied to memories he's chosen to let go. Others believe that reliving certain chapters through lyrics, melodies, and audience expectations feels like reopening old journals. But no song has drawn more quiet reverence than I Need You, because it's not tied to youthful heartbreak or the ups and downs of fame. It's tied to death, to goodbye, to love found at the edge of time. And Perry, who once stood on stages commanding crowds of 50,000 people, has chosen not to perform the one song that matters most. Not because it's weak, but because it's sacred. Kellie Nash wasn't famous. She wasn't in the music industry. She didn't seek the spotlight. But she left a mark on one of the most iconic voices in music history. She had earned a PhD in psychology, focusing on working with children and families. Friends described her as compassionate, funny, and unshakably brave, even when facing cancer for the second time. When Perry entered her life, she didn't see him as a rock legend. She saw him as a man trying to heal, and she gave him something he hadn't felt in years: the courage to be vulnerable again. During her illness, Perry was at her side. He spoke openly in interviews about how their time together changed him, how she taught him to appreciate every moment. Before she passed, Kellie recorded a voicemail for him. In it, she said simply, "Don't disappear again." He saved that message. For months, he played it daily, not to wallow in sadness, but to remember. Her words became his compass, and when he returned to the studio, it wasn't for a record deal or to reclaim fame. It was to honor her, to keep his promise. And I Need You became the final note in that vow. I Need You is not a chart-topping single. It didn't receive massive radio play. It wasn't promoted with glossy videos or splashy headlines. But it may be the most honest thing Steve Perry has ever recorded. In interviews, he never calls it his best work. He doesn't analyze its structure. He rarely discusses it at all. But when he does, the weight in his voice is unmistakable. It's not about music theory. It's about mourning. There are moments in the recording where his voice almost disappears, trailing off, pausing slightly between words, like someone catching their breath. It doesn't sound polished. It sounds real. Perry once said in an interview, "There are things in life you can't heal, but sometimes you can sing to them." I Need You was his attempt. Not to close a chapter, not to move on, just to say something that words alone couldn't capture. Fans who've listened to the track closely say, it doesn't feel like it's meant for us. It feels like it was meant for her. A love letter never mailed. A final whisper across the veil. And maybe that's why he's never performed it. Because it was never about sharing it with the world. It was about keeping something for himself. And when you love someone that deeply, when their absence becomes a part of your every breath, sometimes the only tribute you can give is silence. Steve Perry's return to music in 2018 wasn't a traditional comeback. He didn't tour. He didn't push for airplay. He didn't try to reclaim the spotlight. Traces was not a commercial strategy. It was a memorial, a quiet promise kept. And even now, years later, Perry continues to live largely out of the public eye. He occasionally releases music. In 2021, he put out The Season, a collection of holiday standards. His voice, older, softer, still carries the emotional weight that once filled stadiums. But he's not chasing glory. He's honoring memory. And I Need You remains untouched. No remixes, no acoustic versions, no televised performances. In a world where music is repackaged endlessly, Steve Perry has chosen to leave this song exactly as it is. Fragile, private, final. When asked if he'll ever perform again, he says, maybe. But when asked if he'll sing that song, he doesn't answer, because grief doesn't follow a script. It doesn't tour. It lingers in the quiet corners of memory, in the voicemail you can't delete, the song you can't finish, the promise you whisper when no one else is listening. Steve Perry kept his word. He didn't disappear. He gave the world one more song. And in doing so, he told us everything he couldn't say. If this story moved you, subscribe to RetroWaves, where the music never fades and every lyric tells a story you've never heard. We honor the voices that shape generations and the stories they could never say out loud. In the comments, tell us, what's the one song that still brings you to tears? We'll see you in the next one.